You people out here, I want you to be able to get a shot of what Dana has done. Dana and Ben and Ren. Anybody else? Worth. Of course, it was mine. Yeah. Now, I want you to see. We got the city. We got the institutions. We got almost sometimes what I like to call the no man's land, that area between the city limits and the actual rise up to the revolutionary area. And in fact, I think I even see what could be some indication of a camp there. Slide around and get some shots there for a few seconds. Is it coming out pretty good?
Yeah.
Parks, hospitals, bars, stadiums, a military base, lending institutions, medical facilities. Too far from the bar, but the Hall of Justice, the seat of government. So I told you people, it actually existed, even though I made it up, but it actually exists. And think about the different sight from up there. And nobody down here knows it, they just... Never. Is that a beauty or what? Okay, that's enough. Is there a problem? Under city conditions, people can survive quite nicely with little to no success in whatever they're doing. Because inasmuch as, at the very least, their failure in whatever they seem to be doing becomes an intricate part of the hobby. But this is not so with attempting to do this. For a would-be revolutionist to be successful, he or she must be successful. You cannot ride failure. You cannot even ride some success. A real revolutionist cannot, as everyone else can, continue to accept the status already present in his own partnership. That is, the situation between his thinking and between his doing. It is that kind of situation in everybody else where much is said and little is done. A revolutionist attitude has got to be, if I can say it, I can do it. Because if you can't do it, you should have never said it. The noise could have been made. The wreck may have been there next to the highway, but you, by God, should have never looked. Because when you looked, you said it. And it doesn't matter where it came from, where the wrecks come from. People want to end up arguing that, well, sometimes I say that I should do so-and-so, or that I should stop doing so-and-so. But the only reason I do that, I don't really feel that way, I don't believe it, it's a holdover from my childhood. My mother used to say that all the time, and I don't know, I unconsciously picked it up. Sorry, that will not do. That's like you saying, well, I look at wrecks sometimes, but I don't actually look, my mother makes me look. Your mother did not conjure up car wrecks. Your mother does not make you look at the car wreck. But once you look, the deed is done. You cannot then unlook unless you really know how to do it. So the revolutionist attitude has got to be, if I can say it, I can do it, and there is no exception. And you do not take any exception in such a way as, well, I said it, but I didn't say it. Now, anybody can say that. Even a revolutionist can say, well, I didn't say that. Because a revolutionist would have to say that probably on a weekend, on a real slow day. It is not a matter of whether I said it. It's not a matter of someone's believing that idea I've had floating around that I should do so and so, or that I should stop some habit, or I should undertake some activity. I don't really believe that. I don't feel that. It is something I picked up. So be it. That does not matter. If you have said it, if you look at the wreck, if you've looked at it more than once, you've looked at it twice. Think about it. You have said it. Now, unless you can find out how not to look, how to unlook all the looks, then your attitude has got to be, if I can say it, I can do it. Now, you can stop saying it. I'm not saying that. But you've got to know how. You've got to fully mean it. You have got to refuse, whatever it is, you've got to stop it. You've got to stop listening to you saying that I should do so-and-so. I should do so-and-so. I know I should. Oh, I should. You have got to stop that. You've got the situation of too much talk and very little doing. Now, everyone is doing something. Everyone, at the very least, is doing what Peter so well depicted, and don't look too far at the end down there and get all depressed. But everybody is doing all of that sort of thing. But the question that you people should be able to ask yourself that other people could not in the city, they just can't do it, is this: how much of what you do bears any correlation to what you think? Come on, face up to it. Now, if you just take a real running by real fast like Socrates in a 49 Ford and you go by that, you may think that is a kind of moot question. That, well, certainly I and everyone else, a lot of what we do, and probably most of what we do, in some ways related to what we think. Oh, yeah? Really? I know it's technical, but, oh, yeah? Are you sure? The only way that you can be sure is you never looked at it. If it is true that almost everyone in the city immediately would say that there is a great deal, if not just an entirety, of a corollary between what they think and what they do, then I would ask them this, if I was going to be so foolish as to start playing these Socratic games. If I say, well, how much of what you think is repetitious? And then if they were starting to warm up to it, they might say, well, probably a good bit. And of course, then I'd have them if I wanted them, and if they could be had. And I would say, well, in that case, if there is a real distinct continuing correlation between what you say and what you do, then why is it that you haven't done the things that you've talked about so that you don't have to think about them again? Why have you ever said any one thing twice to yourself, like, well, I should cut down on so-and-so, or I should quit so-and-so? Huh? Is it getting any better? Look at what you think about that is easy to spot, that all of you can think of right now, that just runs through your nervous system, it chatters in your head. Everyone has got at least 2 or 3 that, again, if you didn't look at it real good, I'm sorry it's more technical talk, but I don't know how else to put it. If you didn't look at it real good, you could say, well, this is just a temporary little problem that's been bugging me, and I've been thinking about it. I have thought about it more than once, I'll grant you that. I've thought about it several times. But if you could look at it real good, everybody's got 2 or 3 that you have probably been churning around in your system for 10, 20, 30 years. I should lose weight. I should go back to school. I should call my mother more often. I should get more exercise. And you can say, if we were carrying this conversation to those kinds of ridiculous links, at least unprofitable links with city people, you could say, well, it's meaningless. Everybody has this noise going on. Of course, then I'd say, where'd you get that idea? But never mind. They could say, well, everybody has this kind of garbage running through their minds just going on. And I could say, all right, they do. But do you take it seriously? And the point is, without any other additional information, without making any additional effort, you have no choice but to take it as seriously as you take anything else. It's been going on so long that it is now truly like background noise. But you can't leave it at that. If you are, then you're dismissing all of your intellectual capacities as background noise. Of course, once you get up on the hill, that's true enough, but the rest of it is background noise. But to start off at the level to try to see where I'm pointing, you can't say, well, the stuff I don't want to agree to, or the things that you're about to trip me up in this conversation, I'm not going to agree to them because I just think about them, but it's meaningless. Then the question is, look yourself, well, what else do you think about? Don't call just these like these repetitions. Don't call them meaningless. What else? What's the alternative? What else do you turn around in there that's not meaningless? And I don't have time for everybody to go searching. Not even if you had the support of Lieber and Stoller. You don't have to search, I'm telling you. You should know. That has been what constitutes your intellectual activity. Everybody's. It's just noise. And it's not from your mother, it's from life. As long as there is this continuing distinction between what you think and what you do, then everything is little or no success. Now this still, I guess, is worth a few minutes to point this out. This does not belie the fact that the world is full of people that seem to be succeeding at something. Even if it's just some short-range plan that somebody just succeeded at something they attempted to do this afternoon, to repair their car, to patch a leak in the roof, or if it seems to be something that they're gradually gaining on over a long period of time, to finish school, to get a degree. So that does not mean that people do not seem to be succeeding. But again, it is part of the subtle way in which life has things arranged that they do not feel that they are succeeding. The best that you ever get from the city is some success. It's not negative. What I'm pointing out is not pessimistic. It's unknown. Just to hear me even talk about it, ordinary intelligence would say, well, this sounds pessimistic, or this is truly a downer. People who finish school, people who manage to do something that seems to be successful, if you ask them, do you feel as though life is success, that you are living life in a successful way, you should all know that nobody feels like that they are really doing it. It's all a matter of, well, I'm doing pretty good. It's all a matter of some success. So it doesn't matter that there seems to be one area, either short range or long range, or even more, that you might look upon someone and say, well, now, I may not be successful, but now there's someone who is successful. But down at the level that I'm talking to you about tonight, the absolute molecular level, when they first begin to make noise in the human nervous system and then talk, success is judged on this basis. Does what you think correlate to what you do? And the answer is no. In fact, those in life, if you can hear it, I'm about to drop that one thing, but those who apparently succeed in life, in many instances, if you could see it in a certain way, feel that there's even a greater disparity between what they think and what they do, and they consider that to be part of their motivating force, if they could describe it that way. That is, that they are more driven by the feeling of inadequacies, or I'm not doing enough. Workaholics, that kind of thing is what I guess is referred to nowadays. But their feeling is that you could say, well, boy, you look successful to me, and they say, oh, I know what you mean, I got a car and all that. But every day, I think I got to get up earlier. Because as far as I'm concerned, I've got such great dreams, such high hopes for myself, that, to tell you the truth, I feel like a failure. Now, I know that many people think I'm doing quite well and blah, blah, blah. So, can you see again, in life, apparently, there can be an exception to what I'm saying. That is, apparently, people are being successful, and yet, when you can see it in a certain way, those very ones would feel and believe, if it could be compared, that they are in fact less successful than you are, or someone judging them to be very successful. And so there you've got two people, and the complexity of the situation and or the simplicity of the situation renders both of them being incapable of understanding anything, which is, of course, the way it's supposed to be. Some success, no success, even feelings of failure will not fuel doing this. And of course, all of you should know by now, I do not make any reference to you people becoming rich individually or collectively or becoming famous in some field. But failure to some success, failure to where it becomes part of your life, is based upon, quite firmly, and in the grips of, that disparity between what you think and what you do. So it does not mean that there is some external way to judge that you are successful. Many times there are. If you did get the leaks stopped in your roof, that if you do get through with school and you do have the diploma in your hand, you could call that some success. And you could say that there is some observable success. But the real success is that you are no longer internally driven by this churning disparity between what you're thinking and what you're doing. That is the success. That is the success that is not measurable, is not observable. You can't prove it if you wanted to. There's nothing you can show off. In a sense, only you know it. And maybe somebody else that recognizes that kind of droll smile. I was speaking a little bit earlier, sort of in a backhanded way of saying that the revolutionist attitude has got to be that if he can say it, or she can say it, of course, he can do it. And I pointed out that the things you've already said, it's too late. You looked at them, you were looking at Rex, you took the noise as being you, but now let me take it in what might appear to be, to old Chief Two Eyes out there amongst you, a somewhat more positive approach, rather than that just which has already been taking place in you. And what I was inferring was that you have got to stop listening to that or else do it. Don't listen to yourself say, I got to lose weight. If you've been saying that for 20 years, either do it or shut the fuck up. Quit listening to that. And don't say, well, I don't know where it came from me. I don't care where it came from. I know where it came from. But what you've got to say is don't say, well, it may be some basis of it. And then later you say, well, no, my whole family's kind of fleshy. And I think it's my metabolism. I don't think I can actually lose weight. Well, shut up. Yeah, but then again, now I know it runs in my family, but then again, I do eat too much. Okay, shut up. But, well, maybe I should take a course or read one of those books that says how to love yourself even though you may be a little fleshy. Tell yourself to shut up. You cannot listen to that and not do it and do this. But looked at what I was going to say in a little more positive way. Then the things, and they could be very related. You could just change the verbiage of it that's been going on to yourself, or things that you believe that you would in a positive and active manner like to do. I'm getting real close to something, well, I'll just leave it as a hint. It's what I was hanging about once already last week. I'm getting close. It would be like this. Now for a minute, can you follow me? Regardless, set aside the kind of chatter that your own nervous system has already been doing all these years. No matter what the area is. Weight loss, exercise, making more money, calling your mother, being a better person, whatever. Now, let's assume that you have the ability, or you think you do, to actually, and it may be related verbally to some of those ideas, but that you now want to pick out something, and you decide, all right, never mind that noise, I do want to physically improve my external looks. I want to take up bodybuilding. I want to take up ballet. That I want to do this. I'll give you a little hint on top of the hint. I was going to say, remember we're back sort of in the areas of me saying that you shouldn't tell yourself what you're going to do. Now, all of you have heard that enough to where most of you, at one time or the other, really believe that you've had at least semi-moments of near epiphany of, that is potent. All right, now we've got to go past that. A real revolutionist can tell himself what he's doing. But he only does it when he means it. And it's on this basis now. Notice there's going to be a subtle but dangerous shift from me saying that the revolutionist attitude's got to be, if I can say it, I can do it. And I was taking that more negative sort of approach, relatively speaking, before. That whatever your nervous system talking about, if you're going to keep looking at it, you've got to assume that, all right, if it can say it, I can do it, wherein it can't. But now, if you can mean what you say, then you could say what you're going to do. But if you said it, you'd do it. And that little conversation, that byplay that some of you have picked up on, about it would be like this, but non-verbally, and not this lengthy, of course, it would be that kind of basis of, all right, I'm going to do so-and-so. And the partner would say, how? I hate to say anything after that, but it would be sort of like, watch me. That's how. It'd either be that, or you'd say, I'm going to do so-and-so, and the partner would say, how? And you'd go, say Three Stooges or something. How? You know, I got your how. It is simply that if I said it, that's the end of it. Yeah, but what if you can't? I said that was the end of it. Yeah, but this might key. I said it was the end of it. But all right, it is do or die time. I am going to get up and start doing so-and-so first thing in the morning. And I'm going to get first thing in the morning, starting tomorrow, and cease to do such and such. That is the end of the subject. You got to know what you're doing to know what you're doing. And you've got to know what you're doing to do what you're knowing. You've got to know what you're doing to be able to do what you're thinking. And if you can't, there is no such thing as success. Then you can be rich, and you can be famous, and etc. But in regards to this, which you know I'm talking about, you cannot do it. Also, I'll note again for you, this is almost antipodal to what is believed by the ordinary level of intelligence in people regarding forms of self-improvement, all the way from little bitty forms of self-improvement to, from I want to lose weight, to that which would be considered out in the city as metaphysical, spiritual. Almost diametrically opposed. How's that? Well, I'm going to tell you. What passes for success? Failure. Not just some success. When it gets down to the real serious, spiritual, metaphysical, doing good in the city, what is success? How do you know that you are a gut-wrenching, hand-wringing Jew or Christian or Muslim? I mean the serious kind, the kind that will fall on their knees and crawl through glass, stay up all night and light candle after goddamn candle, or whatever else they can come up with. What is all of that emblematic of the people involved? It's not my opinion. You should be able to hear me. It's the failure that I can't do it. Thank you, Jesus. It's wonderful. I'm so weak and pitiful that I can't do any of it. Oh, bless you, Lord. Thank you for for smiling on me and making me such a puddle of insignificant pee on the body of the church, on the body of life. It is literally. I'm assuming enough of you, besides my little humor, that the laugh is being motivated that you can get at least a little feel, because it's not verbally debatable. It's not my opinion. It is the molecular truth that is always in the city. Failure is a form of success, but it is very subtly, but just glaringly true once you can see beyond binary sight, that when it gets into the very areas, and normally speaking is when I keep using religion, that's the, of course, most readily available known form of people attempting to do something extraordinary, make some change in their life, to get more in touch, more in line with some of the cosmic forces, whatever they want to call it. But the more that they fail from a certain quite real historical view, the more they fail, the more they are recognized as being successful. The saints of all stripes or whatever they're called in different religions, the ones that whine and moan and write this god-awful poetry about, that I'm just a little, I was being charitable, call them a little puddle of pee. They call themselves worse. They moan and they spit up and they want to cut themselves and holler. And they're not insane. Many of you, I hate to encourage you to go back and feel of it, some of you, because it's still, I guess, kind of dangerous, but all of you involved with this, there's a piece of your nervous system that should identify that, just like hearing the sound of the JBs kicking off 1, 2. But you hear that, yeah, I got that. I know what that's about. Those people are moaning and groaning and whining and wanting to cry and then wanting to jump up and smile and kiss life, all on the basis of, I've got such a hunger for you, whatever they're calling it, God. And I'm so insignificant, I'm so pitiful, I'm so weak, I'm horrible. And especially after they die and they leave some of this, other people read, what a great guy, I wish I could have known him. So what they're responding to, the man's admitted it. I'm a failure. And it goes down as inspirational, uplifting, challenging. What? Failure. All right, I just wanted to point that out again. This is not an ancient relic of something. This is going on now. Any organization, any cult, any would-be group of people that are attempting to do something built around some kind of spokesman or teacher or this or that, what's the basis? Even if it appears that there's something living going on, there's some guy alive, some guru. Those that seem to be the successful, those that seem to be the right-hand people, are the very ones that are still exemplifying that same kind of attitude, whether they're writing whining poetry or not. But it's all on the basis that they never measure up. And if they don't whip themselves, and I don't mean that anybody knows what they're doing in this, including the power source, the apparent leader. If they don't whip themselves enough and attack themselves enough, he does it. And they wallow in it. And nobody's crazy. It's just an organization. It's just a hobby. But the failure is the only sign of success. That I can't do it. I can't do it. I'll never measure up. Good boy. Good girl. Yeah. Stick with me. That is success. How else do you gauge it if you're ordinary? That's the way. The only alternative, ordinary intelligence can't perceive. And that is, hell, I could do it. And nobody can perceive that. No, I'm not doing it. I'm going to struggle with it. Of course, then, most of those groups, you notice, I say most, they all then fall back upon some form of karma or afterlife that, well, it looks kind of iffy right now, I got to admit. Here I am, 55 years old, and I don't feel like I've made a lot of progress. But, next time around, because I know I'm building up some kind of reward. The gods have taken notice of me. Isn't that true? And the guru goes. Yeah. And he wonders, Jesus, I wonder. Well. Because he got no idea what's going to happen tomorrow either. But at any rate, there is the feeling that is built into the organization, of all organizations, but as I said, I'm referring to this kind specifically right now, that the organization will not succeed. It cannot do what it purports to do. The people involved will not do what they claim is their objective. They will not accomplish it. But no one sees it in that manner. They literally take failure as the only possible sign of success, because the alternative would be to actually fucking succeed. Would there enough of you hear me? If somebody actually stood up in the presence of the Pope, let's say, to use that example again, and stood up, and after some sermon, I don't have to hear what or whatever they call their sermons, and he's pointing out and reading from the Bible about how we don't measure up and all that, and suddenly if a guy stood up and he said, you know what? I've enjoyed being a Catholic all these years, and it's finally paid off because it just struck me, I can do all that shit. I mean, I can do it all. However you'd say that in Italian. And you realize that the Pope said, son, bless you, but, and he starts reading from the Bible where it says we've all fallen short and none of us measure up and only God is perfect. The guy said, no, I know all that. I know all that. I've listened to it and I've worked on it all these years, but now I got it, and that's not truthful anymore. You do understand they'd take him away. They would literally have to take the boy away, and they'd lock him up somewhere for his own good. The Pope would say, now, I love people to be serious about their religion, but now there's a place for psychiatry in the modern world, and somebody go get that boy checked into a clinic somewhere and keep me posted if I have time to worry about it, and let me know. So, do you see? That's why I was trying to infer that literally the only possibility, the only alternative to taking success as failure would be to succeed, and that is beyond. It is beyond the scope of ordinary intelligence to perceive. And it could laugh when I said that, ordinary people, but some of you can see that. It's just as weird as it can be, and it's just as true as it can be. There's a certain other little aspect. I guess football games brought it to mind. Maybe some of you will see the tenuous connection that just... Ordinary intelligence suffers from a certain an unreal sense of the complex. In that, for instance, that ordinary intelligence, some quick examples of fairly recent things. Ordinary intelligence does not know that man is captive. Ordinary intelligence does not know that talk is energy transformed and transferred. Ordinary intelligence does not know that it does not know what it's going to say next. All right. Maybe just three quick examples of the ways in which I've termed some of this. All right. Growing from that, ordinary intelligence then has an unreal sense of the complex. And without knowing such matters, just those three and many others, without knowing such matters, it cannot see that anything makes any sense. Now, it can say, as it oftentimes does, that life is too complex for it to make sense to mere mortals. And that is not so. It's so for them. But this thing makes a lot of sense. Those of you that are weak enough in the brain now that I can fool you and keep dragging you along, just notice. Time after time, some of you 2 or 3 times a week, just suddenly things do make sense. One specific area that either you had thought about and dismissed a long time ago, or gave up thinking about, or never really thought about, but as soon as I put it a certain way, you went, by God, that's true. That's just as true in life that 2 and 2 makes 4. And you also heard that what I just said, did you realize makes all the sense in the world, is insane. That there's nobody in the world you can go, hey, let me tell you what I heard, and they explain something. If you went and told somebody in the city, they'd go, they'd say, are you any kin to that boy they had to get out of St. Paul's over there and lock up? It takes on the results in what I was calling here an unreal sense of the complex. Even under ordinary conditions, I can point this out properly, that one of these central uses, almost the use of the intellect under ordinary conditions, is to make the complex simple. Read simple as simple/usable. Think about it a second. Under all ordinary conditions, just city life as I've been calling it, to get by in life, what is the purpose of intelligence? Now, you can call it all kinds of things. Go ahead and call it and listen to what it's talking to you inside, but I am wrapping it up for you. The purpose for humanity's intelligence is to make the complex simple. There would be no such thing as technology. There would be no language. There would be no civilization. Man would not have been transforming more complex forms of energy had not almost, at least in the three-dimensional world, almost going in different directions, for him to be able to do things in a more complex manner, to transform more and more complex energies, for him to become more complex himself. To do that, he had to have the intelligence that would make the complex, that is, that which he thinks he perceives out there and in here, to in some way make that more simplistic. How else can you use the so-called discovered laws of science? How can you use the apparent observations of the kinds of behaviors that are endemic between peoples? Man could not do anything human. He could not do anything that is singularly mortal if he did not have intelligence. And if intelligence did not take that, which in a sense, of course nobody can do this anymore, not ordinarily, but if suddenly we could almost wipe your mind blank and you're still here and you're age 30 and you still got all the background experience and all that, if we could do it both simultaneously and suddenly make you like a virgin intelligence, and that you could look around, if you can hear, if this could be done, you'll be able to hear me say it in theory, you would be overwhelmed, to say the least. It would be information overload, just instantly. If you were suddenly, what could you make of all this? Even if you thought, well, I can start somewhere, it'd be like, but God, it's got to slow down. You got to cut out some of this. That's what intelligence does. It's to be able to cut it out, large portions of it, to blank it out. That may sound negative. It still amounts to this. It is to make the complex simple. We've got to turn the tape over. Go back and shoot that again for a minute. Notice I had the decency not to have Dana or anyone actually put in an arbitoire. Because you could look at the edge as being the ultimate one. The little city lad asked his father or his grandfather, where do people go when they die? He says, go over there right to the edge and look off. And don't stand too close unless your daddy still has that good life insurance on you. Back. Under ordinary conditions, ordinary intelligence is to make the complex simple. And with a real revolutionist, now we're pressing on, this is also so cubed and around the corner with time in hand. So I cannot in some proper way say that it's the opposite, because it is the same situation as the beginning verbal premise, that the real revolutionist is using intelligence to make the complex simple, but it's done in a way that I don't have any particular immediate words to try and embellish, unless I was going to pull out my good old profanity, which I guess are getting pretty thin. It is the same situation. You're trying to make the complex simple, but not on the basis that it is in the city, because in the city, to make the complex simple, now forget for a second technology of actually being able to do that, which was necessary, to actually be able to take some apparent law, some observable pattern of how materials operate, what can be done to affect the structure of minerals. Other than that, when it gets to the human intelligence making the complex simple, it's all failure. That is, human intelligence is not satisfied with that which it simplifies. Absolutely true. Human intelligence, I just start picking out one or two things at random that's been historically across the board present. Human intelligence even someone at some particular time who appeared to be rather intelligent, was wired up to be rather intelligent, begins to observe the nature of life, begins to observe the nature of nations and kings doing battle, and the kinds of conflicts between families, and then inside of families. And this ordinary person, he may have been an outstanding thinker of his time, he simplifies it. That is, his intelligence simplifies what he sees down to some idea. That is, simple idea. History's full of them. They amount to about 2 when we get in this area, and that is that people can't help what they're doing. Conversely, people can help what they're doing, and they won't. Right? Sometimes it's in religious guise, sometimes it's not. So that about covers the simplifying of the complexity that ordinary intelligence denotes, observes in human affairs. And so then it simplifies it into, well, people are either just evil because they won't do better, or people just individually do what they must for some reason. And at one time, well, it still is true, some people believe that they are spiritually preordained, that the gods have decided who's going to do good and who's not. And nowadays it would be on a more psychological basis that some people have had such an adverse childhood and background that they cannot help operating in ways that are not only self-defeating, but may be even defeating and dangerous to those around them in society in general. But you're still left with those 2 general choices, which is not the point of this, but to get you to see. Is anyone satisfied with those? No. But they're accepted as the only 2 possibilities, whether you couch them in religious terms or psychological terms. But don't stop. Don't stop laughing. Don't stop looking. In other words, it's a complete failure. They have taken the complex of, my God, how can whole nations go mad? How can the Huns treat us decent Germans? I always like looking back at that area. At one time we had Germans that looked upon some other group as, boy, are they a bunch of barbarians. They look upon the complex nature, if you could do this, that one intellect somewhere looks upon, how can this go on? And he tries to analyze, well, there's such decent people over here that I've met some of them before. And under certain conditions we get along, and now look at this, it's madness, it's friend against friend. We've even got families that have been split up through intermarriage, and it's brothers against brothers. And it's priests calling out for blood, and I thought the priests were supposed to be those blah, blah, blah. In other words, the complexity at any particular time, that an intellect, one that apparently was splendid for its day and time, can look upon this complexity, and it makes it simple. And it will come down as a religious idea, or it will come down as a philosophical idea, and it will apparently come to a real conclusion. Well, it shows that humans are still primarily animalistic barbarians. One intelligence, some observer, after years in pondering, he says, that's it. That's the only possible answer. And he may have by then a band of little followers, or maybe some other people wired up in a similar way that would go, you know what? I guess you're right. Now the question, though, is, can you hear this? Does that satisfy, that simplicity, does it satisfy the person who apparently thought of it, those who apparently adopt it? And the answer is no, of course. Still the purpose of the intellect. I'm back where I almost, don't forget where I started the premise of this paragraph. The purpose, even under routine affairs for ordinary intelligence, is to make the complex simple. But I didn't say to make the complex simple in a satisfactory manner. Of course, in the city, as always, it is in a satisfactory manner because, as all of you like to say, WFCDYH. What fucking choice do they have? So it is satisfying on that basis that they have no alternative. But I wanted to make sure that you understood that even though I'm using the same basis of saying the revolutionist is using intelligence to make the complex simple, in a sense it is far removed from that, because the simplicity that he has got to take from the complex has got to be successful, which is synonymous, I'm using now, with satisfying. that it does satisfy you. And that is falling into free time. That is what they want to say is objective. That is, it satisfies you. It doesn't satisfy me. It doesn't satisfy anybody else. It doesn't meet any standard. Only somebody with an alternative, with a new intelligence, knows when they're satisfied. Everybody else just knows they're not satisfied. But to see something, you see it, and at least for the time being, I'm satisfied. That's it. In fact, you're so satisfied, you'd never think to say, boy, I'm satisfied. As I've also tried to point out in the last several weeks, when you actually see something on that basis, you forget it. If somebody says, do you understand so-and-so? And you might have to think real hard if you were dumb enough, maybe somebody you knew and you were going to try to talk to them, and they said, you know the one thing that still bothers me, we used to talk about a lot. You went, yeah? And he says, I hadn't heard you mention this in years. Has something happened? Do you understand it? And you think real hard and you go, and of course here, let's assume it's a good coffee drinking friend you had, and you want to tell them, but if you tell them yeah, then you begin to muck around with it. You don't even want to tell anybody yeah. But the real answer, if they say, do you understand that now? And you think about it, not even want to say it, but but if you can hear me, one sign that you understand something in the city sense is you forgot about it. And another sign, like right past that, if somebody says, do you actually understand that? You do, but you'd almost die rather than say you do. Because there's no term for this, but I'm going to go ahead and say it. It's revolutionarily tacky. Well, as long as I'm there and some of you heard a little bit, I'll put it to you another way. This is literally true and, of course, otherwise. But only the tackiest kinds of so-called spiritual leaders of any sort, I don't care who they are, would actually tell you that they understand something. That's really tacky. Of course, it's worse than that. But anybody that says, well, I know what the problem is, you won't know what happens when you die. All right, I'll tell you, because I understand. It's tacky. Well, enough of you understand that. I don't know what else to call it but tacky, that you might really want to tell somebody in a sense. And I'm stretching the reality of it here. But it's something that you do understand. And somebody brings it up and reminds you, that, oh yeah, I forgot all about that. And they say, do you understand more about it than I do? Is there something you could tell me? And it's not that you may not try to tell them something, but as far as that direct invitation to exchange energy by somebody saying, do you understand it? Do you actually know what's going on about this? To say you do, now I'm saying tacky, I'm trying to kind of curl my lip and make you understand I mean a lot more. Some of you know, some of you can taste it. It's almost Socrates faced with the Senate again and certain death. Which death is not that bad as long as you don't have to die in a real tacky manner. You know. And for somebody to say, do you actually understand this? And you do, but goddamn, if you're going to say, yeah, I do, Jesus, somebody deserves to slap you. You got no peers around to do it. But you feel like, God, I wish there was a God outside the system, because assuming that somebody asked you if you understood something, if you're going to follow this, and you slipped up and said, yeah, I do. Right then, I suggest you, a real revolutionist would wish, damn, I wish there was a God outside this system so he could strike me dead. That's how tacky that is. Back to where I was, if you recall where I was, more or less. The real revolutionist has got to make also, to use the intelligence, but a new intelligence, to make the complex simple. But what he makes simple is satisfying. It is success, or he has not correctly done it. Which, of course, you should know. Anytime you feel as though, well, I've been struggling trying to ponder something, trying to think on a certain matter, and I've come up with several good ideas, and one or two of them even seems to be along the lines I think you've been talking about. But I don't know, I still find it somewhat disquieting. I'm not fully satisfied with all of my ideas, although I feel like I'm getting close. Jesus, give yourself a break. All you're saying is, well, I'm failing right along, but I'm feeling citywide good about it. There is no question in the revolutionary sense, in the sense of a new intelligence, there's never any question that you understand something. There's no debate. It doesn't even go on that fast. You don't even deal with, you don't ever ask yourself, do I understand this? That kind of language is foreign. New intelligence doesn't know how to speak that. Do I understand this, or do I understand this completely? Do I understand this correctly? Do I know what I'm doing? Do I know what I'm thinking? Do I know what I'm talking about? You either do or you don't. 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 That was the answer to all that. A revolutionist has got to be prepared. To understand everything. A revolutionist has got to be prepared to simplify everything. And I would have to suggest to you that some of the laughter that sometimes sounds like I'll kick some of you in your privates verbally when I say something, what I did was simplify it, just, you could say accidentally, that I did it in such a way that it hit one or two of you, and you just felt like that you had taken a serious body blow. It's something that had been hanging around in your nervous system. Is a very complex thing, something to do with morals or the gods or religion or something, and it was suddenly like I took the whole thing and just broke it apart, threw it down, picked it back up, and there was one little piece, and I showed it to you, and you went, yeah. And that's it. There's nothing else to say. You didn't have to say, I agree. You didn't have to say, well, thank you, or I'll think about it. It was just like, I threw it all down, broke it, maybe pissed on it, picked it up, laid it back down, came back in a few minutes and held it up, that one piece, and I went, there it is. Like a piece of a real, it was a 5-dimensional holograph, and I just held it up, and you went, and there's nothing else to say except, the revolutionists have got to be prepared to see everything, be prepared to take the complex and to see the simplicity of it. And you have got to be able to see that which is complex and that which is simplistic in their proper doses and in their proper forms. Because relatively speaking, everything is not as simplistic. Well, don't get hung up here. In a sense, everything's that simplistic. But what will strike you personally, that enough of you have had experiences, some things start off and seem very simplistic, such as I can almost seem to tear something apart, shake it up, and pull out one piece and go, and you go, oh. But then sometimes it's like I have to pull it out, and maybe nobody gets it, or maybe somebody does, but you don't. And you never looked at it this way, but then later, maybe it's like I go in and I pull out another piece of it, and I hold up both of them. That may or may not seem to come from even the same part of what it was I broke apart. But it's from the same thing, but they've not even been close. But I hold up two things, and then maybe you go, oh. So in a sense, it appears to be not as simplistic as something else you saw. And that's why I was saying that there is an appropriate dose of the simplicity and the complexity of everything vis-a-vis your intelligence at that time. And that is why, for other reasons, as I used to stress, that many of you adopted and tattooed on your rump, is there's no such thing as a period. Because you can see something, but some of you, well, many of you will now know, you got no question about what it is you see, but you could almost predict. You shouldn't, but you could almost predict that this ain't the end of that. You can almost smell even something better. But maybe you're sitting here and I'm doing it, and I just keep talking and pull you on away from it. And so, in a sense, you have hit something that you realize is still more complex than it will be. As long as I've been hinting around, let me hint some more and get a little bit closer. What I refer to as the partnership. That in each and everybody, there's just without any doubt, unless you got physical brain problems I don't know about. Well, you couldn't. God, surely you couldn't. Oh, well. I was trying to think if you had more than I knew about. In other words, if you're walking around sane, then everybody has what appears to be in them two voices up here, two things, as witnessed by, forget all the old descriptions of it, or even the new descriptions. It's simply this. There's apparently two parts of your nervous system that is sort of alive, sort of in equal ways, or else you could not talk to yourself. It's that simple. You could not think. But if you could, you wouldn't know that you were thinking. Well, I didn't want you to get stuck in me saying you talk to yourself, because I don't mean that you go around like some people I know and mumble to yourself. But I'm saying in the nervous system, even the thought process requires an observer, somebody to be aware of it, or you wouldn't know you're thinking. So that's what I mean, of course, by talking to yourself. All right, that kind of partnership could be looked upon, to bounce back to my metonymy of man and his nervous system, as a government, as a state. The state being the city and the potential revolutionary, the virgin areas, the new intelligence up there on the hill. The partnership could be looked at in the governmental sense, like this, that has happened before out in life, as a kind of dual throne. You remember, I guess, what was the great example of the kind of the beginning and the end of the Roman Empire, setting up the eastern seat of power in Constantinople, and then whoever was running Rome still staying as the western prince. Let me call it a prince for the time being instead of a king, but it's still the ruling powers. The partnership could be looked at as this kind of thing, that you had two brothers, two sisters, two people that apparently are splitting. Rome still staying as the western prince. Let me call it a prince for the time being instead of a king, but it's still the ruling powers. The partnership could be looked at as this kind of thing, that you had two brothers, two sisters, two people that apparently are splitting, just right down the middle, their sovereignty over the state. It is a dual throne. May I further suggest to you that you've almost got one prince that seems to be in charge of planning, and one prince, the other one that seems to be in charge of doing. Just a thought. I guess we should just skip on past that. Let me say before the tape runs out, a few more things since I started that. Let me get something more worthwhile, more practical. Just forget all about me mentioning that. Let's go back to what should be a full, willful exercise of power if someone had a stable monarch, that you had some real sense of a ruling power in you that could mean what it said. Such a king, let me suggest to you, would think complexly and do simply. It would be so out there, and it's always been so out there, and it would in here be triply so, at least. It would take, of course, may I point out, someone able to plan and think complexly to do simply. Those of you really getting sharp, I can point out that there is what would appear to be a verbal, and it happens out here. I don't mean to limit it to a verbal, but it would apparently be a verbal exception to that. And that is that there are simple people that can end up in power and act simply. But boy, do they give a lot of people a headache. Boy, do they make a lot of people think, I believe I'm going to move. And I think I'm going to go hide in a hole until this whole thing blows over. But I did want to point out, when I said that it would take a complex ruler, someone that was able to think and to plan in a complex manner, to be able to do what I was going to get to operate in a simplistic manner. That there are times it happens. And don't worry about history. Don't worry about me bringing out Attila again. Look at you, motherfucker. That which is simple and crude and oftentimes referred to as clever can come out in you, and it can operate simply, but it sure does give a lot of the population the blues. It does not end up in a profitable reign to anyone involved except historians, because they certainly get their share of the history books. You remember, even Kyrut pointed out recently that it seems that those that get the lion's share, they even got me misusing that term now, hanging around with you people. Those that seem to get the bigger share of notice in history are those that seem to have kicked life around. And that which historically would seem to be the greater cases of some individual apparently being responsible for very questionable episodes in life's history, I was going to suggest to you, are those that end up in power on a temporary basis like everybody else, but end up in with the reins of power and not only operate simply, which is one of the aspects I said of a good ruler, but they're almost an exception. They do not operate in a simple manner based upon the complexity of their planning. They operate in a simple manner based upon the simplicity of their thinking. Oftentimes referred to as fanatics. Oftentimes referred to as deranged. Oftentimes referred to as German. No, never mind. Just a joke. But back to what I wanted to point out to you specifically. A real ruler, an excellent ruler, out there, which is of course not our real interest, but out there, if you want to bounce off that to start with, and then in here. But a real excellent ruler would be one who would think complexly and then do simplistically. Now think about it a second. That is the whole dance. That is the whole exercise of power in life that everyone submits to, all the way from people having dreams of gods, even if they're anarchists. They have dreams of some kind of, if not God or gods, some idea of some superior or some better cosmic order than what they're faced with. They can't see, as they would say, what few there are of true anarchists. I was trying to give you some extremes. They cannot see any historical or present reference or possibility of there being the right exercise of power, and so they say, to hell with all power as it's known, but it's still based upon the possibility, their belief, that there could be. Well, say couldn't be an anarchist. There's got to be something to push against. In this case, the push against is right, there's got to be a better way, we just don't know what it is. All the way from that to those who do submit, which everyone does. Those of you, I assume not too many of you are seriously wrestling with this anymore. Everybody loves to be dominated. Now you may be with some other body, some other bodies that you dance forward and they dance backwards. But you ultimately, you and everybody else wants to dance backwards. It's just a matter of degree. Everybody submits to power. That's what life is about. The real exercise of power is simplistic. That is the most efficient. An excellent ruler does not get involved with long harangues. It's the kind of thing I've been talking about last few nights. And those of you dumb enough to think about I was talking about out here, then you're dumb enough to think about I was talking about out there. But a real king does not give long-winded explanations. He does not ask, do people mind if I set up some new rules? He does not get through stating the new rules simplistically, like, just for instance, everyone on the street after 5 o'clock from now on will be shot. He does not say that and say, does anybody have a problem with that? Is there any discussion? He does not even wait around or walk off the balcony and hide behind the curtains to see how they take it. Not an excellent king. simplicity is the most efficient way to exercise power. How'd you do that? I just did it. Oh, no, really. How'd you really do it? I just did it. That's the nonverbal. That is the correct exercise of power on yourself. That would be the correct exercise, the correct joining of what you think to what you do. That is the success that has got to be minimally present for you to press on with this, or you'll continue to whine about it. You continue to miss what it is. You may continue to be intrigued with me talking, and it may give you some sense of almost cardboard bravado at the time, like, boy, yeah, it is possible. Just tell the whole world, fuck you. I'll decide to do something. I'll decide, hey, I'm going to grow 2 inches and lose 40 pounds and learn how to sing tomorrow. I'll do it. Back to what I was saying for the second. The correct, the most efficient, the most excellent exercise of power, which is doing, is simplistic. The more simple it is, the more efficient it is, the more agreeable it is. To be cut by a brand new scalpel, believe me, is preferable to a rusty fishing knife. And don't tell me you don't be cut by either one. The correct, the most efficient exercise of power is simplistic. I refer you again to the city, to city consciousness. Does anybody operate on that basis? And it's not that I'm right and the world's wrong, just feeling your own nervous system. Contraire, if you did decide, if you were a city person, and you decided, all right, I've had it, I need more exercise, I need to lose some weight, and I just need more exercise, I'll take up aerobics. All right. Of course, you're already making it complicated. I'm going to go join a class, all right. Then what happens? The hobby expands. You know where I'm going, surely. You got to go buy the clothes. You got to go sign up. You got to have them, if you're an ordinary person, you've got to have your credit okayed, and they're going to sell the paper somewhere to where you're now under an installment sales contract with some finance company. But then you got to go and you got to talk to people. They show you all around. They got to fill out cards. You got to fill out a questionnaire about what you eat and what your goals are here and how's your sex life, and you'll answer it all. But then you want to see what everyone's wearing there. You want to make sure you got to go buy new shoes. You got all these old things you're wearing around the house, but you got to buy the new shoes, get the right color coordinated, get you some little leg warmers. Of course, some of you need some little brain warmers. But you get all that, which is all right, but do you understand that you are now distancing yourself from the direct, most efficient exercise of power? You are already falling into failure, becoming part of the hobby. By not showing up, you go for a few days and then you don't show up. And your husband or your own partner or your wife says, you're not going back to class? You understand we're now in debt for $1,200? Well, what I decided was my feet's been hurting, and I think it's these shoes. Well, all of you know this. This is not a cynical attack upon the folly of man. This is the nature of man. This is the nature of life. The more efficient, the epitome of the exercise of power would have been what? Now, you can make it up, surely, now that you've seen that set up to go another way. If a real revolutionist says, I'm going to lose 10 pounds, then I'll pick out the most efficient way. I'm not telling you to do it. But probably a motherfucker would quit eating. Because that's efficient. Plus, if you do that, you can drop 10 pounds, most people, in about 3 days. And if you like that, then it's just downhill from then on. Just go a few more days. And I'm not saying that they might not go out. Well, I am too, almost. The side hobbies, I've got to go pay somebody, I've got to be around other people to do it. I'm not saying in some way that's intrinsically evil. Now, you know I'm not saying that. Or you should know it. But that is not a part of the most efficient exercise of power, that is, of doing. that now your thinking, if you're ordinary, has become so complex. Because I did it pretty quickly there, the scenario I framed up. Ordinary person would probably go shopping for their aerobics class. They could kill a couple of weeks, right, or at least a week, of going to the different ones, checking the prices, seeing what the facilities are, then going back to the first place to look at it again and say, okay, I'll see the locker rooms, then go back to the second place, then the third place. And you could say that if you're ordinary, you could say, well, I'm moving closer to the goal, but do you understand? It is now partial failure is built in. But the failure, the partial failure, at the very least, is now part of the hobby. The hobby is no longer the attempted exercise of some power. The attempt to change is no longer to get in better shape. It's now all kinds of stuff. It's to pick out the best place to get in better shape. To pick out the best place for the best price to get in shape. To pick out the best place with the best price with the best kind of people, my kind of people. You know, a lot of you Presbyterians here, to pick out the place with the best possibility of helping me with the best price with the best people that's closest to the house. It goes on and on. That's just the way it goes. And so you can say that the thinking involved there becomes complex, but now it's become self-defeating because the complexity is now the basis of this, an unreal sense of the complex. That to lose weight, to get in good shape is no easy matter, my good friend. To make fun of me, it takes effort. It takes planning is what it takes. You got to know what you're doing. Not to lose weight requires that you stop eating or cut down your eating. To exercise requires this, believe it or not. It requires that you exercise. Well, no. No, you got to know what you're doing. You got to have the right kind of support. You got to have the right kind of people, be in the right place, etc. A proper, an efficient, an excellent king would think complexly, and he would do simplistically. But you have got to know how to properly think and plan in a complex manner to properly and excellently do simply. Or else you end up with what is, as I was calling, an unreal sense of the complex. That built-in failure, of course we're just talking about now the kind of success you get at city level, is now a preordained, a foregone conclusion. It is an unescapable part of your hobby. Whether you lose a few pounds here and put it back on, whether you feel like you're in better shape or not, now becomes irrelevant, because as far as going from here to there, if we're going to call that the planned success, that you say, well, this is what I want to do. When somebody says, I want to quit smoking. Where did I see that ad for that club? What club? How about those groups? Don't they have a Smokers Anonymous or a support group? We can go talk about it for a while. Maybe a long while, but at least I can go there weekly. You mean they got two in town? Which one's closest to the house? Is one of them free? Does that one cost you money? Do they make you actually stop now, or can you go there and talk about it? Can you smoke at the meetings at either one of the places? They guarantee, is the money back guarantee? Are a lot of them Presbyterians? You surely see the humor in it. Well, of course, at the city level, that's not funny. The city level, that's just city level. There, you cannot operate, you literally cannot continue this much further, some of you, with an unreal sense of the complex. So what you must do, and of course all of you at one time or another suspect this, that in many areas, or one or two that you may really find interesting in your life, that you know exactly what it is you should do. Exactly. There's nothing to talk about. It's just, I should do that. Talk. I should do that. Why can't I do that? Because there's no doubt some little something. It may seem to be some big something to you. It doesn't matter. You still suffer from a kind of unreal sense of the complex. That, well, I'll wait a little while longer. I'll think about it. You're playing the same game as, well, I'm going to have to check some more of these aerobic classes. That last one, I didn't like the ratio of men to women there. Other than that, I sort of liked it. I'll put that down. What I'll do is I'll start making a list of these. Now, I may come back to that one. Because for all I know, that may be the prevailing ratio. I better check some more places. I just didn't feel that easy of there being that more men there than women. That's the same thing of saying, well, where can I go join a club? Or where can I think about this? I need to read another book on this. I need to take my time here and plan. What if there was something about that idea that I just brought up and dismissed about the dual throne? Nah, you better forget about that. You better forget about that. I don't see any great joy there. Well, I'll hit a few more questions. You new people, anybody visitors, I've been taking questions that were very specific. I've asked the people here in and out of town very specific, everyday questions, and I'm doing them in such a way that I am responding simply and directly, having to do with behavior, and sometimes maybe a few lines about how the reversal or change of energy will have a known effect if a real revolutionist tries this. If you visitors coming by, riding your armadillos, go out and try this and laugh, the known effect is by no means assured. Remember, you heard it here when? Second. First. All right. This question is getting, I'm just going to pick out the heart of what the question is. The question has to do with a person who has people working under them. And they're saying that there are certain standards of quality of the work that I have got to maintain, and I've got to have the people perform in a certain manner, and it gets to be a question of, and they quote something I've said before about kicking their machine. That is, how much are you going to lay on and kick these people under you when you have got to hold up a certain level of work? All right, in that case, in that kind of case, and it just so happens this person that's not the only one in the group has a, well, many of you, it doesn't matter. If you're in a position that you have got to maintain a certain quality of work, that you're responsible for it, that's serious, and there are people under you, and you've got to see that they do it. Either that or do it yourself, every bit of it, and you probably can't do it. And so the question is about, should you actually be kicking on ordinary people's machine in some way, trying to manipulate them or make them do that which you feel like that they have got to do. Now in that kind of case, it's not really a matter of just kicking somebody's machine, because now what you're dealing with is you're pushing life in certain part of life's machinery in certain necessary places. That is, you can read people, but you're pushing it where it must be pushed. If you are out there in the city and you've got some job, you're in charge of something, in some profession, some business, some enterprise that you've got, and you have taken on, or you have accepted by being in this position, that all right, this quality, this standard of care or work has got to take place, and those under me have got to understand it. And so it's not then simply a matter, the kicking of the machinery, the times I first brought that up, those of you that remember, you should be able to even put it together yourself. It's not that in some way has changed. You cannot go around kicking people's machinery on the basis that you mechanically won't kick people's machinery. That is, that your machinery wants to kick their machinery. And I'm now trying to answer these questions. I am now answering these questions on the basis of assuming that you've got some, at least part-time, degree of a new kind of alternative view, almost a new intelligence of what you're asking. So now you're out there in the city and you're with other people, and it's not a matter of mistreating them. It's not a matter of kicking their machine and demanding the impossible of them. Because whatever the possible is, the way life is arranged in your particular situation, that life says, it may appear to be that your profession says, or that your business says, that all right, this has got to be the quality of the output. It's life saying it. And if life is supporting that, then you have got to help push, if you're going to stay there, you have got to help push those under you, which is life's machinery, in certain ways that they do that, which is purportedly, which you're assuming, is the purpose of your endeavor. There's nothing wrong. You're not mistreating anybody. And another part here, they say, where was it? How hard, if it gets to it, should one, how far and how hard, if it came to it, should one actually push? Hard enough for success. And if that becomes too hard, then it was either too hard for you or too hard for the people you were pushing. It's simple enough. You get out of the hog closet. Here's another one, very similar. I had them together. Problem I seem to have on an everyday basis. I like to do, and usually do, good quality work. What I can't do is work with someone who does sloppy or substandard work. I can't do that and not have the quality of their work bother me, all right? Nor should you. It's not a matter that you let sloppy underlings or associates, that you let less than what you consider to be successful work. It's not that you no longer let it bother you. Now, you can let it bother you personally in your own revolutionary universe, but that does not necessarily require that you are mistreating them or kicking their machinery, and you may not even have to express it. Or you maybe perhaps should not express it to them in a personal manner. You may have to express on the basis of, hey, I'm responsible, or we're duly responsible for the quality of work here, and if we're going to try the kind of work you are, we're all in trouble. And of course, you're in a supervisory position. You can say, I'm not going to get in trouble over this, because I'm responsible, and I'm going to see to it that you either do better or we're going to let you go. If you're into it in kind of a joint venture, you have to say, this is going to be it. This is the last time, because I am not going to have my name. I'm not going to walk away from this and leave it at the level at which you're now operating. But you got to face up to a kind of citywide inevitable. As I was mentioning, if you recall, in the question a night or so ago that somebody was asking about, telling about whether people lie to them or not, and I said that you might as well face up to the fact that ordinary people have no real conception of a difference between lying and the truth. They simply do not. Which, if you can hear, it was a quite direct response to the question. Right in that same way with this, is ordinary people really have no conception, generally speaking, of there being a distinct difference between good work and substandard work. They don't. And if you're in a position that it affects you personally, just internally, you should not overlook it, but it's not necessarily the case that you have to do something or say something about it on a personal basis, but I will assume that it would also have the distinct effect, which this person is inferring, that it could affect you externally. That is, it could affect your paycheck. It could affect you getting further work. But you start off on the basis of assuming, and it's a safe assumption, that other people do not have a clear distinction based upon yours. Just go by yours. A clear distinction, a clear feel that there is a difference, the kind that you're seeing, between good work and sub-quality work. Who's going to tell them? And you can do it without kicking their machine. You do it without holding them responsible. That's why I pointed out that I set up the premise that you operate on the basis, a safe assumption, a safe basis, that they do not to themselves have a clear distinction. They do not hold a clear distinction between good work and semi-good work, because semi-good work in the city is good work. The audio tape's run out, folks. I'll get to more questions next time, and perhaps even more answers.